welcome to this week's edition of Soul Call Friday. I'm so glad that you decided to check in with us today. Now, one thing I want to say before I get started is I love your feedback and your comments. It means a lot to me, and I'm sure that my guests appreciate hearing how their openness has blessed you. So don't be afraid to write. Don't be afraid to share your comments, your impressions, and most of all, consider being a guest on one of our so called Fridays. I'll tell you about why it's a good thing later on in our series. Right now, though, I want to introduce you to Cheryl, who has we're trying to figure out how to separate it, but it looks like there's a lot of overlay with Cheryl. And so we're going to move through the overlay. We're going to move through the intricacies of the things that she's been fighting since, from what I understand, she's 9 years old. Hey, Cheryl, say hello to the audience.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. So don't forget. Now, don't leave because this is very interesting stuff. And I think that Cheryl's issue is going to be helpful to everyone. So, Cheryl, we were talking before the show began, and we were talking about what happened to you at 9. And then, as a consequence, what happened to you after that. How long well, you'll tell us how long it went on, and then how it affected your adult life. So, we're going to walk that journey. So, let's start with when life actually changed for you as a child.
My parents were divorced when I was young, probably about 7. I don't ever remember them together.
Hmm.
I don't even remember them being in the room together. So I don't know exactly when they separated. But when I was 9, my mom met a man and was going to get remarried. She introduced me. I told her I didn't care for him. Something about him just I was not happy with. And I said, promise me you won't marry him. And instead of doing what normal adults do and say, I can't promise something like that, we'll have to see how it goes, she lied and told me she wasn't going to marry him. And then she did. So that started it. And then somewhere, in the first year or so, I think she may have married him before I turned 9. But when I was 9, I was molested by my stepfather. And I told her about it. She said it would never happen again. And it did.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
At that time, I was living just with her and seeing my dad, I think, every other weekend. So I told my dad about it and immediately went to live with my dad and saw my mom every other weekend.
How did she feel about that? What was her reaction?
I don't know that she ever had a reaction around me.
Mm-hmm.
I found out years later that she said that she didn't believe me. She thought I made it up.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately for me, my dad did believe me, and so took me out of that situation immediately.
Mm-hmm. And nobody ever got you checked out or anything like that?
I don't remember any physical exam. I was not actually raped, so there was no need really for a physical exam. I did see a counselor a little bit at school, but I think we pretty much danced around the subject. I don't think
back then we danced around everything.
Yeah, I don't think we ever actually talked about it.
Wow. So when your mom found out, did she have any reaction at all? I mean, you're 9 years old. You have this boyfriend turned husband who is now in your house where you can't escape. So did she have any reaction? Like, what made her say it wouldn't happen again, and yet it did?
I don't remember. Honestly, I blocked out so much of my past when I was a child. Even like before I was 9, I don't remember much of anything before my sister was born. I don't remember any. So I think I when I was really young, I think I just probably blocked out traumatic reactions to things.
Well, tell me about, if that's happened, trust me, something traumatic happened for you to come up with that defense, because typically that's like a guardian defense mechanism. So how about your sister? Was your sister affected?
My sister was born just before they got married, and as far as I know, he never touched her. And that's really the only father she ever knew.
Okay.
Yes, she stayed with my mom. She was 2 or 3 at the time. And so,
So did you have any more contact with this man after you went to live with your natural father?
not until I was in high school.
Mm,
My mom actually, he and my sister and my then half brother moved to Oregon. I was living in Southern California,
hmm.
and I never saw my mom again until my senior year of high school.
Wow. So that was what, about how many years?
Uh, let's see,
5, 7,
eight.
8,
Well, I was in fourth grade to 12th grade, so yeah,
mm,
about 8
8
years.
years. And so you didn't see her, you didn't talk to her.
We talked on the phone
Hmm.
occasionally. We wrote letters,
Hmm.
but I never saw her.
So I want to go back to the fact that your mother didn't believe you. That's an important issue because that happens so frequently. Very often, women are so afraid to be left by the man who is abusing their child that it's easier for them to hide out. So they duck in to unbelief, put their head in the sand and act as if it didn't happen. Did you ever get an opportunity to ask her why she had that reaction?
I had an opportunity, and I think I just didn't do it.
Hmm.
I spent a little bit of time with my mom just before she died. She had cancer, and we talked about a lot of things, but that never came up.
Mm. Do you feel like you made peace with your mom?
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
My mom and I had a pretty good relationship her last few years.
Mm. That's a blessing.
Yes, it was. In fact, she was diagnosed with cancer in August, I believe. My dad died like a month and a half later.
Hmm.
And so she was the person I talked to processing the grief of his loss.
Mm.
And she was a big help for me. Just
Wow.
even just talking and venting. It was nothing, deep,
Hmm.
but I was able to talk to her regularly then, and it helped a lot. So that when she was gone, then I didn't have anybody to talk to, and that was a little tough.
Yeah, you think? Um, so your mother must have been a loner. She was an only child. Is that what we're saying here?
No, she had a sister and a brother. In fact, when I saw her again in my senior year of high school, she came back to California for her brother's funeral
Hmm.
and looked me up at that point
Well,
because we
that's a
had
good
even
thing.
lost track of each other probably for almost a year or two at
Hmm.
that point.
Well, I want to talk about at 9 years old, you have this mature encounter with a man, and so you're 9, and so you're a kid. How did that handle you? How did you handle that? But how did it handle you? How did it change you?
It didn't seem very traumatic at the time. I was a very curious kid, and so I had a lot of probably mature questions about what was going on.
Hmm.
It was a more of a matter of touching
Hmm.
and him exposing himself, and he was, I guess, giving me answers to my questions, but it didn't seem traumatic at the time.
Hmm.
It was just weird. It was
So,
off, and
what
I
were
knew it
some of the
wasn't
things
right.
that he would say to relax you and to calm you? Because clearly he had to do something, otherwise you'd be shrieking.
No, I don't know. It was more. He was a big man, so I was
Hmm.
a little afraid of him. But mostly, it was just. I think I walked in on him once and he was masturbating, and I was asking him, or I turned around and walked, and he told me not to walk away and showed me what he was doing, and it
Wow.
was strange.
And your mother never had a sense of this man's perversity?
No, she interestingly enough, she worked opposite hours of him.
Mm.
So I was there with him when I wasn't in school and she was at work. So she was never around when
She
any of this happened.
never was. And obviously she still didn't believe you.
Mm.
And so what did she think? Why did she think you lied? Did you ever give any thought to
I
that?
have no idea. In fact, later on in my life, when I was raped, she didn't believe that either. And it
Yeah.
took my baby sister being molested by my other sister's husband before she realized that I probably wasn't making it up.
Mm.
And this was probably 20 years later.
So you were an adult when that happened.
Yes.
And that
I was
happened.
19 when I was raped. When Sophie was molested, Sophie was 12. And so I was probably in my 20s. And when
Hmm.
it happened to Sophie, my other sister told me, she said, Mom finally realized that all this
So
time that
this
you
is the
weren't making it up.
so this is the same. I mean, this is the same guy that did it, or
No, it was my other sister's husband.
oh, so your other sister's husband, Sophie, the one who was young when you were more. So he just decided to rape you.
No, no,
Um,
okay. I'm sorry. I got it's all convoluted.
well, I just want to make
I
sure that
was
we're all following out here
raped by a friend
of the
of the
family.
family.
Uh-huh.
Sophie was molested by my other sister Tammy's husband.
So you have two sisters.
Yes.
See, Tammy's the latecomer in this explanation.
Yeah.
We had
Tammy is the one that I
that you
was with
grew up
me
with.
and yeah until
Hmm.
until my mom moved
Okay,
away.
and then
Sophie
Sophie's the.
came later.
Hmm. So, so now here's what's interesting. You were raped. You told your mother again, and obviously, did you go and get checked out or any
I
doctors
did. I
thing?
went. Well, I don't remember. I think they took me to the hospital to get a check, but I know I went to the police department
Hmm.
and filed a report and everything.
So was he prosecuted or anything?
No.
No.
The police believed me,
Hmm.
but they said there was no proof, and
So when they took you to the hospital to get checked out, there was no proof.
well, there was no proof that it wasn't consensual.
Oh, because you were. So was this a date rape?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm getting. So you see, I'm getting there.
Yes.
So
Sorry.
this was a date rape.
Yeah.
And then you had the molestation as a kid. Now, I'm going this way for a reason because this is telling me that this is tracking from your mom, and that for whatever reason, all her daughters are affected by this. That means, many times when you have situations and family things like that, that's something that's seated in you. Now, I always teach that there's no sexual encounter that doesn't have a leave behind.
Mhm.
And I read an article once. I don't even remember where I got it. I'll try and find it where one of our universities did a test and talked about how they found male DNA in women who were 80 years old from men that they'd slept with when they were younger. And so I'm wondering then, I mean, and to me, that is a scientific statement on what we call generation spirits and
Mhm.
generation curses, where by whatever it was that your mom picked up, she could have been molested, her grandma. I mean, I don't know. Do you know if she was?
No, I don't, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, because my thought is for her daughters to do that, those kinds of acts and encounters create a covenant. They create a generational covenant, and that covenant is with whatever the spirit that person has. I'm thinking that for that to happen to all of you all, that's pretty unusual unless there was some sort of generation thing going on. So how did you react? How did your sister's experience affect you?
Uh, well, I was in a different state at the time, of course. When I heard about it, that was when my sister Tammy left her husband when she found out about it,
Mhm. Mhm.
and filed for divorce. But she got married at 16, so it was really strange already then. Sophie ended up getting married at 16 also to somebody that was an abuser. Not, I don't know about physical, but
Mhm. Certainly
verbally,
verbal.
definitely. Um, so I think more than anything else, I was sorry that it happened to her. I felt bad. I felt vindicated
Mhm.
that my mother finally believed what had happened to me because of what happened to Sophie, and probably annoyed that it took that for her to believe it.
You What was her reaction? I mean, how did she say, okay, so when you told me about whatever stepdad name was, when you told me about that incident and I didn't believe you, this happening to my other daughter uh, kind of convinced me. uh,
She didn't tell me. My other sister told me, the one that
Okay.
was married to the
So
Sophie's
your mother
molester.
never really resolved this with you, and that's what
No,
I'm trying to get at.
no.
She never really accepted her part in it. She never really accepted the blame for it, but she accepted her part in the baby child.
Mhm.
Okay. So here we are, fast forward. I'm going to ask you to do something very interesting. I want you to say, give some thought to how this shaped you as into the woman you are, and and are there any what I call solical leave behinds that you keep facing as a result of this, as a possible result of this?
Well, I think the early sexual encounter probably um, had a lot to do with why I was promiscuous as a young adult.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know that there was a direct correlation, but there was something there that caused me to. not take sex seriously
Mhm.
and to be very casual and almost unconcerned about it.
Mm. So
Because,
it's just a physical experience for you.
yes. And when I lost my virginity, I made a point of losing my virginity.
Hmm.
It wasn't a romantic encounter at all. It was with an older man, and it was just something you did to get it over with.
To get it over with.
Yeah.
So whose idea? So you actually initiated it. Well,
It,
making a point means that you kind
yeah,
of initiated
yeah.
it.
Well,
So he was the mark.
yeah,
It's time for me to
he
stop
was
being a virgin.
flirting with me. Somebody told me don't do that unless you know it's going to end up this way, and I said I don't care.
Hmm.
So yeah.
So, so let's walk this. So here you are. How many years later was that?
Uh, let's see. That was when I was 16.
So we're from 9 to 16. So what are we talking? 7 years here or
Mhm.
something like that. So here you are, 7 years later, and you feel like you need to do this to become sexually active. But I want when I go back to hearing what you said at age 9, it seems like you were dabbling in something then, whether it was television or show or what, because you were not bothered by this man's invasion of your body.
I guess the only thing I can tie it to, my dad always had Playboy magazines around, and sometimes some of the little more hardcore magazines, and
And you
I
read them.
yeah, I read them. I was one of those weird kids that read everything, so I probably started reading them just to read because of
Hmm.
the articles. And
But you were
I
fascinated.
yeah, I was fascinated. I looked at the pictures, tried to understand
Hmm.
why they would pose, what was sexy about it, that kind of thing.
But there's something else. And we're going to pick up in a minute to find out what that is. I want you to give some thought to that because I understand about fascination with the nudie books and all of that. That is clear, but I want to find out when we return. Is that the man who became your stepfather the only one that your mother dated? Okay. Hey, we're going to take a break. We're going to wrap it up to this week. Obviously, you can see we have a little bit more to dig into Cheryl because I'm on a journey with her to help her understand to get free. Scripture says that it's the truth that makes you free or sets you free. And sometimes our recall has to be jogged a little bit because there are certain elements of events that just we close off for purposes unknown, whether they're curiosity, fascination. So we're going to come back with Cheryl next time and we're going to figure out what's going on here, how we got here, and then see if we can help her loose these chains and the burdens that she's carrying, because there has to be guilt, there has to be embarrassment. All of those are real natural things when you have that. And so many homes have sexual perversion in them that none the adults in the house don't want to discuss, the kids are terrified to say. So I really want to spend a little time with this. So until next time, thank you for joining me for this week's edition of So Called Friday, and join me next time when we resume, because everybody has a soul. God bless you.